Welcome, everyone. We'd like to start our McNair APR webinar with a quick poll just to see, read the room and see out there who is working on this for the very first time. So Donna, when you get a chance, if you could set that out and we can look at that. And joining me is Lourdes Maria Zavala. And is this your, that's for Veterans Upward Bound. This is
I
McNair.
know. I
Oh,
changed it
ignore the title.
earlier. I changed it, but it didn't save
I
it.
believe you. I believe you. I see in the
Thank
yeah,
you.
down there. So we're just trying to get a read of the room, and we're also trying to find out which database program y'all are working with, because it kind of helps us point out certain things along the way. The chat is available, but I think we wanted to have folks put their questions in the Q&A so we can build a separate report with those Q&As. I'll be watching the Q&A for you, Lourdes, answering best I can when it comes up, but then I'll raise my hand. So you can see my raised hand in case it's something appropriate to the field you're working on and maybe want to answer live. So far right here, we've got about 64 people, 64%, if you can see that, Lourdes, that are, this is the first time working on the McNair APR. Welcome, everyone. Then the database, we have 36% at Bloomin'. And I think the other ones, we have Lakai folks on board, and student access is also tied with Bloomin' right now. And we have some Excel, which I know Lourdes is close and dear to your heart as well. Thank you for answering that. That does help us get a tone for who's in the room, so to speak. And I'm going to go ahead and turn over to Lourdes. I think we're going to share the results. I think we did share them, right? We did share them.
Yes.
These results. Okay, great.
Great.
And I'm going to turn my video off, Lourdes, and my audio, but I will raise my hand. Please put your questions in the Q&A, and we'll try to get to them as soon as we can. Thanks, Lourdes. Take it away.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much again. And again, I'll be really looking forward to answering any questions that you might have. But let's go ahead and really delve into this APR because, you know, with 64% of you all saying this is my first time I'm submitting, I want to make sure that you have a really good understanding for the APR and preparing for it. First of all, we know that the annual performance report the website will go active. We're anticipating early February. And you typically have 30 days to get your APR in. And so we definitely want to keep that in mind. And something that Lisa and I were talking a little about earlier is the majority of the information that you need should now be available. So hopefully this is just going to be about that process about gathering that information so that we can go ahead and submit the APR. The APR submission process really does not allow us to provide a whole lot of narrative. And so as we go through this APR submission process, we'll keep talking about a spreadsheet where we will use a particular record structure that we will find at the department's homepage when we go out to the McNair program. So for many of you who are new, you'll want to get familiar with that website. So I just Google TRIO programs, go to the Ronald E. McNair program, and then if you click on the APR tab, you'll be able to see some links to some instructions. Now, having said that, you won't be able to actually get to those because they have not yet finished the website and the revamp that's happening. But I mention that because you'll definitely want to get familiar with the website because when the APR website goes live, that's when the updated documents, the formal documents will be updated. We and Lisa has provided for you some of the documents from last year's APR, but we have edited them for 23-24, for this 23-24 reporting period. And so we've highlighted in red when there is an updated field, but you definitely want to make sure that you get the updated instructions. One of the things that is different about the annual performance report this year is that if you've submitted an APR in the past for the 36% who have, are going to see a change in how we certify our annual performance report. Because before we would use our annual APR submission process, we would print a document, which was our signature page. We would get the signatures that were needed, and then we would upload it to the APR website. However, this year, for all projects, we have to submit a digital signature. And so you will be provided with a document like the one you're seeing on your screen. That's the user guide. If you go out to the SSS, the Student Support Services APR, because they've already submitted, you will find this document. but Lisa has also provided it for you. But this is going to include those instructions on how we will provide a digital signature. We will have to make sure that you log in fairly early to the APR submission process. So at that APR website, they've currently indicated that they're anticipating the website to go live in February. So go out there early in February and make sure that you log in to the APR submission process, to the APR web portal, because we'll want to do two things. We'll want to make sure that you have been updated in the Department of Education's web database for who is being allowed to access the APR system. And if you are new, most recently, and you're not in that database, you're going to struggle to get into the APR website. And for some of the other APRs we've been submitting, we've been seeing delays in trying to get those permissions. And so that's why we really encourage you to go out there and get your permissions set. The other thing you'll have to do is that you'll have to identify who is your certifying official for your grant, and for your grant as the grantee, who at your institution is the person that would sign off. That individual has to be approved. And so when you log into the APR website, once it goes live, again, you have to wait till it goes live. And we're anticipating that in February, that immediately when you will log in, you will have to certify who is your certifying official. What you're currently seeing on the screen is the instructions to where you will go to log in. The project director will have to log in through the TRIO website. So you'll have to go to trio.ed.gov and click on login. Anybody who is going to access the web portal will need to make sure they have a login.gov account. Lisa, you have a question?
Can you make it a little bit bigger? You know, me and
Sure.
my old eyes.
Okay.
Probably fine for everybody else, but for me, thank you so much.
Perfect, perfect. Okay, thank you for indicating that. So when you log in, again, you'll go to trio.ed.gov, you'll click on login, and then this will take you to login.gov. Again, I mentioned that the directors, anybody that is a data entry person or designated as helping the director to submit the APR will need a login.gov gov account, as will the certifying official. You'll go through the duo factor authentication to log into the website, but once you eventually get into the APR website, you'll see a PO number, the project, and indicate a go. You can click on the go. And once you click on the go, that will bring you into the APR website, but it will also allow you to identify, here is the name of the individual that we have identified as your certifying official. If that individual is correct, you can click on yes, and you can go ahead and continue and proceed into the APR web portal to submit your APR. If the person indicated is not your individual, then you will need to click on no, and you'll need to fill out a form that will allow you to identify who that certifying official is. You'll identify your PR number, the first name, last name, the email address, and the phone number of the certifying official, and then click on send. This will notify the contractor, the APR web portal contractor, that you are needing to identify a new certifying official. This will trigger an email message to your program specialist to indicate that you need to change in certifying official and whether they approve it. Once the program specialist sends the approval to the contractor, that contractor will send an email message to the certifying official to indicate you have been identified as a certifying official. You now have permission to log into the APR web portal, but you'll have to create a login.gov account. Okay, so in most cases, if you're at an institution where there may be other TRIO programs, the certifying official may be the same individual, and they may already have those permissions. And even though they may not have been identified previously, because they may be a new individual at your institution, but you have to complete this process, and your certifying official has to be approved by your program specialist. And so that's why we're recommending that you go ahead and complete this process even though you're not yet ready to submit the APR. We have had some folks who I've been notified that said, it's been 2 weeks now and I have not yet found, my approvals or indication that my person has been notified. And so it's because of that, again, that I'm recommending make sure you do that process ASAP. And once the APR website goes live. Okay. In some cases, you may want to continue with the submission of your APR. And so you can, even though you have sent that notice to get your certifying official approved, you may want to go ahead and you'll notice here, and even though it's kind of blurry, but you'll notice that next to the no is a skip. And so if you are still waiting, you can still go into the APR and you can skip the process and still continue on with the APR submission process. Because the one thing that will be important for you to do, as well as identifying your certifying official, is to log into the APR website and download an Excel file. This Excel file that you download once the APR website goes live will identify all of those participants that you must continue to report on. It will identify those students' case numbers. It will identify individuals that you are still tracking. And again, are having to include in an Excel file that we will prepare and upload to the APR website. It's important that you download that Excel file immediately because you can save a lot of time and effort in just updating the records that you have to report on, and to remove anybody who you may already included in your Excel file and are no longer required to report on. The reason we want to do that is because if you prepare your Excel file and you have included somebody that you no longer have to report on, or that a previous director may have reported on, and you no longer have to report on them, you will get an error message at the initial onset of the upload of your file. And you'll get a message that says, you've included these individuals on your Excel file and you are no longer required to report on them. You have to remove them from the Excel file, re-upload your Excel file with those individuals removed, and then you'll be able to proceed with the APR submission process. If you do not do that, you cannot move forward until they are removed. And so again, 2 important reminders to complete immediately once the APR goes live. 1 is certifying your official, and second is downloading the Excel file from the APR website. In this APR digital signature submission process, you'll notice that you have opportunity again to identify your certifying official, but you will also be able to identify where are you in the APR submission process. When you log in, you'll notice that we have a couple of different options here that you will see. If your APR has not yet been submitted, then you'll see a signature status that says it's pending. You'll also notice the middle one that says approved. Approved means that both the project director and the certifying official have the APR has been submitted and both individuals have provided their signature, their digital signature. The last option is that if you log in and want to check the status and you see PD only, then that means that only the project director has provided their digital signature, and that means that the certifying official has not yet signed. Some things that are also important about the digital signatures and some changes from this year is that in prior annual performance reports, we've been able to submit the APR within 5 days. However, that process has changed, and now you have 2 days after the APR has been submitted for the digital signatures to be provided. And so you want to make sure that you complete those signatures within the time frame that you're given, and especially if that's by the APR submission date. Something that the Department of Ed provided when they were doing webinars regarding this digital signature process was that they've indicated that in the future, you will have no time after the APR must be signed immediately by both the director and the certifying official once the APR is submitted. The timing of the APR submission process, given that it hasn't yet gone live, is something that you'll want to make a note of, and especially because if this happens over the, we'll have spring break coming up in March, and if for any reason the APR is delayed into February, it might go into a March submission. So you'll definitely want to make sure that you are in contact with your certifying official and let them know of this change process. For some of you, you may have had now the certifying official that was your prior certifying official. So it will just be about updating them and letting them know about this change in the process. So this document is very helpful to go ahead and forward on to them. So some things that you will also see once the APR website goes live and when you submit your APR is this particular screenshot, again, is for the SSS program, but we're seeing that it's staying the same for all the others, is that you will see an opportunity to download your PDF, your report. Your report is going to be very important this year because this is the second year of the grant cycle, and it is going to let you know how many prior experience points you're earning. So you definitely want to review that document before you hit submit. And then you'll also have an opportunity to download your data, which will include all of the new case numbers for any new students that you're reporting on, and a file that you should keep for your records. Because in the event you're ever audited, then that's the file they will be referring to. They'll indicate, these are the students you reported on and ask you to, in that audit, if you're ever audited, to provide some documentation to support what you have reported in the APR. What you'll notice on the bottom of this particular submission is that you will see something similar to this data certification tab that now indicates this is your PR number. You'll be asked to check here where it says required that to the best of my knowledge and belief, the information that I provided is complete, accurate, and verifiable. You'll notice that you will then click on the approve, and that now provides your signature. Once you click on that approve, it will trigger an email message to your certifying official that the APR has been submitted by the director, and for them to go ahead and log in and provide their certification and their digital signature. So they will see something very similar. So that's how we will submit the APR digital signatures by both the director and the certifying official. If you have any questions regarding this, feel free to, again, drop that into the Q&A, and we're happy to respond to that. But it's pretty straightforward if you follow, what's in this document.
Thank you, Lourdes. The number one thing is the minute you can get in, the minute it becomes live, the website is to go in and take care of this. But you can be thinking about this ahead of time. We've uploaded this document in the Google Drive, so you can start looking at it, so you can be prepared to jump into it. Okay? So thank you, Lourdes. Now we're going to shift it over to...
Wonderful. Okay.
Thank you. Yes, if you made it a little bigger, I know I could always put my glasses on, but, that way the recording will be, it'll be nice and big there. So Lourdes now is going to take you through the sections and she'll go through that, but I will still be here and answering any questions or look at the instructions ahead of time and maybe copy and pasting some answers that everyone can see if you go into the Q&A if you have any questions. Thank you, Lourdes.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so I mentioned that the APR, we really do not provide a whole lot of narrative. Okay, there will be a couple of instances where we do provide some narrative. That will include some narrative on our competitive preference priorities. Maybe in the event if we didn't reach our numbers, we'll be asked to respond why we didn't reach our numbers. And in another section of the APR where we respond to particular fields of data if we respond to too many unknowns. As we go through this record structure, we do have a choice. One of our choices to say, I don't know. It's unknown. The information you're requesting is unknown. And if it is a critical field, meaning that it's a field that addresses either one of the objective fields, and you're indicating too many unknowns, and you exceed 10%, then it'll want a response from you. How come you're exceeding 10%? for these critical fields. So given that, there are no other opportunities to provide a whole lot of narrative. We are again responding to who where our participants are, to how we met particular objectives through our responses using a record structure that is provided to us. And again, this one that we're looking at now was last year's, edited for this year, but again, you will definitely want to download it from the APR website once it goes live. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. I mentioned that the Department of Ed is going to use our responses to these fields to address our objectives. And so, before we look at these fields, I do want to mention what are those objectives, okay? Because we have 5 different objectives that we need to respond to. One of them is the numbers that allows us to indicate, did we meet our numbers? And then the other objectives are research and scholarly activities. If we meet that objective through the responses on this Excel file, we'll earn 3 prior experience points. Our second objective is graduate school enrollment. The number of participants that enrolled in graduate programs, we earn 3 points. For continued enrollment in graduate study, that's our next objective. So this is, you can see there's really stress, the continued enrollment for our students that enroll in graduate program studies. We earn 4 prior experience points. And then our last objective is the doctoral degree attainment. How many of those participants that we worked with achieved earning a doctoral degree within 10 years, okay? And so for that objective, we earn 2 points. So you can see that we're going to be responding to this particular, these particular objectives through our responses with these fields of data, okay? So let's go ahead and keep that in mind, because when we begin looking at these objectives and some of those fields, you'll hear me say, this is going to form a denominator. It's going to identify who is the group of individuals that the department is looking at to evaluate a particular objective. Okay? So with that, let's go ahead and look at the APR. So some of the things that we will fill out when we log into the APR website and into the web portal is the project identification. A lot of the information at the APR website, of course, will be tailored to your project because you have logged in and signed in. And so much of the information will be pre-populated. What is your PR number? What is the name of the grantee? There are other things that will not be pre-populated and you need to fill in. You will fill in, for example, who is the individual, the data entry person, whether it's the director or another identified person who has also been given permission to the APR website to fill in this information. You'll fill in what is the date that the classes began at your institution for the 23-24 reporting period and provide contact information. So you'll update as needed. The rest of this form is really the certification and the warning. And again, that is going to be done digitally, but essentially we're saying that the information that we're providing through our responses on this APR can be, are certified to be correct and can be readily verified. Other things that we will respond to within the APR is with respect to services. We'll have identified the number of participants that received both the required services and permissible services. The number that we provide should never exceed the number of students that were served within our reporting period. So if, for example, we were funded to serve 30 students, then none of these should exceed 30. Again, we're providing numbers of the students that receive these actual services. You may have offered the service, but here we're strictly indicating how many of those participants actually receive these services, whether it was research or scholarly activities, summer internships, seminars and educational activities, tutoring, academic counseling, assistance with graduate school, and assistance in securing financial aid for graduate school. For the permissible services, we're wanting to let them know how many participants received education or counseling for financial and economic literacy, mentoring, exposure to cultural events and academic programs, and or other. Okay. So here we're strictly providing some numbers. And often our databases, whether it was Student Access or Blumen or Lakai or our Excel spreadsheet, depending on how we're keeping those records and keeping track of those services, will provide those answers for us. So we'll just use our databases to provide that information. The next thing that we'll report on in the APR are the competitive preference priorities. And we don't earn any prior experience points or anything. The department just wants to know, you received some points when you submitted your grant, and how did you implement these particular competitive preference priorities? And so in some cases, we might just look at information that was mentioned in our APR in 22-23. We might edit it, but we will use that information to indicate what were some of those resources or opportunities or activities that we engage students in to address these competitive preference priorities. You'll notice that the department is wanting to know this, but they're not wanting to know this, right? They only give you 500 words, and you may have engaged in a lot of different activities. So we have to be short and sweet. I know I like to type this up in Word and then use the word count, and then I copy and paste. So they're wanting for you to address this first one, how you promoted equity in student access with access to resources and opportunities, depending on the type of serving institution that you are. And then in the second one is they want you to identify some things that you presented in your project's logic model and services that you may have mentioned, and how were those used, those activities to engage your students such that you would meet these outcomes or these objectives. So again, short and sweet. A lot of these activities, and one thing I usually recommend is for you to go back and look at your grant. Mostly those attachments that you uploaded with your grant, because sometimes they're embedded in the plan of operation and or throughout your grant. But the best resource is the document that was uploaded for the competitive preference priorities. So please take a look at those, because we all wrote something different. So go ahead and begin looking at the record structure. And I know I'm going fairly fast because we have a lot of fields that we're going to review. And also we want to make sure that we leave lots of opportunity for you to ask questions. Okay. So if we think about this particular record structure, we know that we're going to submit an Excel file. And so every column will have a heading. And so you can see in this record structure that we've indicated this is going to be the database column name. You want to make sure that your column names from the Excel spreadsheet that you upload all match these, or it will not be accepted. Also make sure that you don't include additional columns. I know that something sometimes happens in Excel. We might hit the tab and add another column, and we definitely don't want to do that because then you'll get an error message to indicate you've uploaded too many columns. And so you'll have to go back and edit it before the file can be accepted. If we think about also this Excel file, every row of data is going to be some pertinent information about the student that we're updating. And so if you think about this, the first two column fields are really identifiers, identifying that the student is your student from your institution. The fields 3 through 17 are identifiers. So it's going to have the demographic information for the students, their name, their first name, their date of birth, when they were selected to participate in your program, whether they were first gen, low income, and etc. Fields 18 through 25 are really going to provide the program status of the student. Did they participate in your program? When was their project entry date and their grade level when they began participating? Fields number 26 to 31 are asking about the students and their degree attainment. Did they earn a degree, a bachelor's degree? Because we know that students who earn a bachelor's degree will then form a cohort, which we will track for graduate enrollment. Fields 32 through 34 are really going to address another objective that we have, regarding the students' participation in research or scholarly activities. So that's where we'll respond to who is our denominator and who actually completed the research. In fields 35 through 47, we'll provide information about students' graduate enrollment and their persistence and their continued activity, continuing participation in activities. And then in field 48 is where we will use one field where we'll identify a name change or how we are also tracking the students. Lisa?
Yeah, I have a question, Lourdes. Are you, you're still talking, just, you haven't started going through the fields yet, right?
No,
Because we're still
nope.
seeing, okay. Some people thought, because you're talking about some other fields, you were just mentioning
In
the
summary,
important critical fields that we're going to go through each field right now. So she's going to
Yes.
start moving down as we go through each slide. I mean,
yes.
thank you.
Yeah, so what I just mentioned was a real summary. We're telling this whole story about this student through these responses in these fields of data. So let's go ahead and now take a look at the individual fields of data, okay? I mentioned that the first two fields are identifiers. If you think about our data and this record structure, our Excel file goes into a mainframe database. And so every student, for a McNair student, will be identified by the institution and identifying that this is that student's information for the project year 23-24. So in PR, we'll have our PR number from our grant. And then batch year 2023 will identify this is the 23 information for this participant. All students will have a case number. This case number is assigned by the Department of Ed web tool. And if you think about your APR Excel file, the new participants that we upload, at the initial upload of to the APR website, are new participants or those new students who were recruited in 23-24 will not have a case number. So they will get their case number at the conclusion of the APR submission process. Okay? So on the onset, those new participants will be uploaded with a blank case number. But at the conclusion, when you download the Excel file, they will now have their assigned case number. The next few fields of data, again, are going to identify who those participants are. So last name, first name, middle initial, and date of birth. These fields of data are unique. And so once we report on a participant to the Department of Ed using this APR web tool, you can never change that because all of those fields together, combined with the case number, provide the information for a unique individual. If you later try to update any of this information, the web tool will give you an error message. The error message might and believe this student is a new individual. And so it'll give you an error message because that student is new and maybe you're trying to report a case number. So it will identify it as an error. If you try to include individuals with a name change, it will also say, well, then if you included that person here with that case number, then you've forgotten somebody. So do not, once you report on an individual, do not change any of those first name, last name, or date of birth, or their case number. Okay? So you will use the last field of data that we will get to the latter part of this presentation as the field where you'll say, this is the other name because the individual has had a legal name change, for example, that you will also track that individual. Okay. The next few fields of data, again, are demographic information. So they allow us to identify the student's gender, their ethnicity, and their race. And so you'll notice that here you'll identify using the participants' information from their intake into your program to self-identify whether they identify as a particular race or ethnicity. Okay? So you will provide information on all of these fields of data. Okay. You'll notice that the next few fields of data, field 15, 16, or 17, are fields of data that the Department of Ed uses to identify whether you are in compliance with respect to a student who is first-gen low income and or a student who is underrepresented in graduate education. Okay? So these fields are critical. You should never use unknown in these, even though you notice that you do have an opportunity to indicate the unknown value. So hopefully you, in your assessment process, you will identify and have the documentation to support whether that participant is low income in field number 15, if they are first generation in field number 16, and then underrepresented in field number 17. This particular group of fields, in combination with another field that we will get to, that field Part CD, is going to help the department identify whether, first of all, you have met your numbers that you are funded to serve, and secondly, whether you are in compliance with respect to indicating that a student is both low income and first generation and meeting the 2/3 criteria. So again, these three fields are critical to ensuring that you are in compliance with your APR and in your recruitment processes. The next few fields of data allow us to start capturing the information about the student's enrollment at your institution. You'll notice in field number 18, we'll identify when did the student first enroll at your institution. We know that we recruit students in McNair at the varying grade levels. And so here we want to identify when that student first enrolled. In the next field, number 19, here we'll identify whether this participant attended a community college or a two-year institution before they came to our institution, our four-year institution. So you'll respond yes or no, and or unknown. Okay. The next field, 20, here we'll respond to the project entry date. When, not so much that the student entered your project, but when did they get their first service from your project? If they are a new participant in the 23-24 reporting period, then you need to make sure that that date falls within your reporting period. So if we have an October 1 start date, a new student should have a first project service date from October 1st to September 30th of 2024. If you don't, then you will get an error message if you try to call them a new participant and you have a project entry date that might be prior to that. Then that error will require you to make a change, either fix the project entry date or indicate that the student is not a new participant in the 23-24 reporting period. Perhaps they are a continuing participant, and this field, Part CD, has to be updated. Field number 21 requests for us to look at the student's grade level based on the number of credits the student has completed, your institutional data, and to identify when that student, what was the student's grade level when they first received services. Field number 22 is a critical field. And so this critical field allows us to identify the number of participants that were served in 23-24. You'll notice that we have a few options. A participant coded as 1 is a new participant. A participant coded as 2 is a continuing participant. And a Part CD3 is a prior year participant. And participant 4 is a prior participant who has become deceased. Oftentimes, the 1s and the 2s, the sum of those records are counted to be the number of participants that were served in the reporting period. And prior participant 3s and 4 are those prior participants that we must keep in our Excel file because the department is using their information to report on an outcome. We know that we're continuing to report on a participant with respect to their continued enrollment in their program, their graduate program. We're also reporting on whether they have earned degrees. And we mentioned a 10-year time frame. And so those prior participants that we're continuing to track for doctoral degree attainment are oftentimes those prior year participants that are going to be reviewed and evaluated for doctoral degree attainment. Option number 4, the prior participant who is deceased, allows us to respond to whether a participant that we're having to track, that has to stay on our records, and if they become deceased, will impact our outcomes for those objectives. However, what we see with those particular participants is that if they earn a doctoral degree, then they are not removed from the cohort that we're tracking. But if they do happen to become deceased, they don't impact our objectives because they will be removed from the denominator on who might be evaluated for that objective. So this option 4 is really helpful to us in responding to that outcome when we find out that something is unfortunate as a participant becoming deceased. Okay? So it's important to know that if we find out at any point any of our participants, just because we're tracking them for so many years, and we find out that they became deceased, that we report that using this option 4. Field number 23, Enroll CD, allows us to identify whether the participant was enrolled during the year. And so we know that in order for a participant to be counted as a McNair Scholar, they need to be enrolled in our institution during any one of the terms, fall, spring, or summer, to be actively engaged in our program. So we need to report whether they were enrolled or not enrolled. And the thing with some of these particular fields of data is that your response to one field has a validation role in another field of data. And so, for example, if we say somebody is a new or continuing participant, but we indicate they're not enrolled, then the APR web portal tool will come back and say, well, wait a minute, you just said they're a new or continuing, but you told me they're not enrolled. And so then it will force you to go back and edit and review your fields of data to ensure that that validation rule is met. Okay? So we definitely want to make sure that, that we're reporting with that understanding that there are other fields of data that impact some of my responses to some of these fields. Okay. So field number 24 is project participation. Here, they want to know, when was that student actively participating in your program? Did they participate during both semesters, or did they participate during the summer? Here, you will look at the engagement of those students that you've identified as new or continuing in that Part CD field and indicate when they participated in your program. You'll also notice that you have some responses, for example, response number 9, to indicate that student did not participate because they were a prior year participant, meaning that if in Part C, I coded them as a Part 3 or 4, that they are a prior year participant, then project participant here should have a response of 9. That is another example of the validation rule that is checking your information, okay? So we'll see that across some of the remaining fields of data to say, okay, we're looking to see if you're responding accordingly. And if not, again, the web tool will indicate you need to fix this record before you can submit with the submission of your APR. Okay. So thank you, Lisa. I saw the question. I see you're typing an answer, so appreciate
Yes,
that.
I am busy at work here.
Okay, cool. So we're at halfway mark, and so that was field number 24. We have 48 fields of data that we have to respond to. So let's go ahead and continue, and again, appreciate your questions. Field number 25 is asking us whether the participant who was served, so somebody who was new or continuing, what funds did you use to support any of the activities that the student was engaged in? Did you use only your federal funds? Or if you received money from your institution or any of those non-federal funds, were some of the activities that they engaged in supported with that? You'll notice option number 9 again to say there were no funds being used because this was a prior year participant, and also it may be unknown. Hopefully you will have, great record keeping regarding your, not just the student participant records, but how your monies are spent to identify, which funding or where monies are coming from to fund particular activities. The next field, 26 STEM, is asking whether the participant that is served, so anybody coded as a 1 or a 2, new or continuing, and whether their major was in any one of these STEM fields. Again, you'll notice that we have a couple of different options, 1 through 4. You'll also see that we have an option value number 9 to indicate they weren't a participant, so I'm not going to be required to report on the student's major. You'll notice that within the instructions too, that I think Lisa uploaded as well, you'll see a description of what are these majors and what is the department really looking for. So pay particular attention to those instructions, although it is important, and if you're new and this is the first time you're submitting the APR, that you'll find that some of those instructions are not fairly lengthy, so you might have to give your best response to some of these questions. The next few fields of data are asking the question regarding your participant and whether they earned a bachelor's degree or the equivalent during the reporting period. If they did, then you will respond a 1. Okay. Now, you'll notice that this is not asking whether this was a prior year participant or whether they were a current participant. They're asking the question, did this participant earn a bachelor's degree or the equivalent in the reporting period? And if they did, then you will indicate 1, yes. If they didn't, you'll indicate no. For prior year participants who you're reporting on, that field of information may have already been provided from you from the previous APR, and you'll just continue to report what was previously reported. In field 28, if the participant, and even for your priors who earned a bachelor's degree, you will provide the date of the bachelor's degree. If they earned a bachelor's degree within the reporting period, you need to make sure that you report a bachelor's degree date that occurs within the 23-24 reporting period. So, for example, that October 1st through September 30th. Okay, that bachelor's degree date for those students must fall within that particular time period. Okay, for your prior year participants, that will have already been reported, and so you'll just keep the response you had before. You'll notice in this particular case that we have a bachelor's degree date with the 999 values, indicating that for that person where we said no, our response for the bachelor's degree date will be a 999 values. Okay? In most cases, your project database has been already updated to allow you to provide responses of this, that no, there was no bachelor's degree yet earned. It's important to note that we are providing this bachelor's degree date because we are now going to identify that this student has now formed part of a cohort on when they earned the bachelor's degree date. And we see this within field 29. When the instructions come out, you will see a new response added, 23 equals 2324, to identify that this student who I indicated earned a bachelor's degree field in field 27 and in field 28, indicating they earned a bachelor's degree date within my 23-24 reporting period, will now belong to the 23 cohort or the 23-24 cohort, as is added in this particular field list. These groups of individuals will now be tracked in future annual performance reports for the doctoral degree attainment, because in that particular objective, we're indicating that an individual who has earned a degree in a particular cohort will earn a doctoral degree within 10 years. And so here, this allows us to identify groups, cohorts, which will form our denominator for particular objectives to say how many of those students in each of these cohorts actually earned a doctoral degree. So this field, again, is a critical field because it's allowing us to identify who are those students being tracked. You'll notice that in this particular instance, we also have some different responses. We have an 8.8 value in case we made a mistake in a prior APR, and a bachelor's degree was earned, but it was failed to be reported. So you can choose option 88. And then you'll notice that we also have an option 99 to indicate that this individual is still a continuing participant, or an individual who is not yet, because it can also be a prior participant who has not yet earned a bachelor's degree. It's important to note that you cannot, in future APRs, with that option 88, you have to use an 88 if you forgot that, because you cannot go back and add a participant to an existing cohort. So if you made a mistake, option 88 is your only option to say that student did earn a bachelor's degree, but I didn't report him in a cohort. Okay. The unfortunate part of that is if you forget a participant in a cohort, then you can never count that individual, even if they were to earn a doctoral degree. Okay, so it's important, again, to be careful with this particular field, number 29, when identifying individuals in a particular cohort. If a student has earned a bachelor's, in field number 30, we will identify a field of study. And so in the instructions, the Department of Ed provides some values, and they will indicate, use these values to update this main field of study. It's important to note that last year, the department changed some of these fields. So please use the instructions again to make sure that you're accurately reporting on those fields of study when a student earns a bachelor's degree. This particular field of data, again, is part of a validation rule along with the bachelor's degree date when we indicate somebody has earned and has formed part of a cohort for our bachelor's degree. So you can see those validation rules. If they graduated, what was the field of study? What was the cohort they formed? And if you make a mistake in any one of those, again, it's a validation rule that will say you have an error, and the APR web tool will require you to fix it. Okay? So again, we got to get that story straight. Okay. If we don't, we get an error. Okay. So field 31, for those individuals who have earned a bachelor's degree, we will indicate what the cumulative GPA is. You'll notice again, we have an option 9.999 to indicate that a participant has not earned a bachelor's degree. And in this case, we also have a value of 000 for them. The next few fields of data I mentioned are those fields 32, 33, and 34, that allow us to respond to our objective regarding the participants that were served. So anybody that we coded as a new or continuing, and whether they participated in any research or scholarly activities. One thing that I mentioned about these particular activities is that your best guide is your grant. Because within your grant, you would have identified these are the activities that we will engage in. These are the activities that were approved when your grant was approved. And then also within the evaluation section, you would have identified, this is how I'm going to assess whether I met this particular objective. And then lastly, you might look at your objective section within your grant to say, again, these are the activities that we will engage in to measure this particular objective. So some things that are really important about this particular objective is, again, they're identified within your grant because everybody will have something different identified. But remember what our mission is with the Ronald E. McNair Baccalaureate program, is that we want to prepare our students for research. Okay, and so many of these activities are research-based. We have to identify those activities that we identify as research or scholarly activities to meet these criteria that are noted here, meaning that those activities have to be rigorous, okay? They have to be more rigorous than than them just being in the classroom, okay? They have definitive start and end dates. It's a program or activity that you have identified that will be completed within a particular starting and ending date. They will have benchmarks for completion. So you'll be tracking, I tracked whether they completed these various components for that activity and that they're conducted under the guidance of an appropriate faculty member, okay? So they must meet in order for you to identify them as a research or scholarly activity to have met all of those criteria. If they didn't, then you do not want to address them and include them here. Let's look at these particular 3 fields of data, okay? We'll notice that the first 2 options in all of these 3 fields have the same 2 first identified activities. And they say option number 1, they participated. Option number 2, they participated. And so if the students participated, they form part of the denominator for this objective. And you'll notice that option 1, though, says they participated, but they did not complete it. And in option 2 is indicating they participated and they completed the components. Because remember, our particular objective is indicating that the students will participate in any one of these 3 activities, and they will, the participated is the denominator, but the completion of all of those activities, any one of those activities is the numerator. And so this is how this objective is evaluated. You'll notice that a participant can also be coded as a part 3 to indicate they did not participate in research. They did not participate in scholarly activities. Option number 99 is they were a prior year participant, so they did not participate. And then a 0 value to indicate it's unknown whether they participated in research, whether they participated in scholarly activities, and or whether they participated in your research internship, okay? So again, options number 1 or 2 will form the denominator of who participated, and options number 2 in any one of these 3 criteria will identify whether they completed any one of these 3 activities, thus forming the numerator, okay? So again, you want to look at your grant, look at what you wrote, and maybe you could have even identified it within your logic model of, to say we will indicate they'll participate in these scholarly activities, because that is truly, the intent of a McNair is giving students the opportunity to experience that, to gain an understanding of that, so that this will increase their chances and their likelihood of earning a doctoral degree within 10 years. Okay. The next few fields of data are now allowing us to look at those students and their enrollment in graduate studies, okay, and their preparation for graduate studies. Something that is really important to understand about the McNair APR and the reporting of some of these fields of data. And that is that, oftentimes we want to tell the department right away, they enrolled, they're my students in 23-24 who graduated with their bachelor's degree. And I want to tell them that in the fall of 24, that they were in a graduate school. And so I want to tell them their first date of enrollment, because I know that now, right? It's spring of 25. And so I know they enrolled in graduate school, and I want to tell them about that first grad enroll date. However, for the McNair APR, we don't tell them that they are in graduate school, except for in one particular field. And we don't tell them when they started until the year that they started. So having said that, is that, for example, if I have a student who earned their bachelor's degree in 23-24, then one of the fields, which we haven't yet gotten to, I'm going to tell them they enrolled in graduate studies. I will not, for example, in field 36, tell them they enrolled at graduate school until the 24-25 annual performance report. Okay, so that's the first case for my students in McNair who will be enrolling in grad school. The second part of that APR is with respect to those students who are in a graduate school, and that the 23-24 reporting period was their first year of graduate studies. It is now in their first year of graduate studies that I will provide the information that they first enrolled in grad school on this date, with potentially a fall of 23 graduate school enrollment date. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and review these fields again, but I do want to mention that because, again, my first inclination sometimes when I'm submitting the APR is to immediately say, yeah, they're in graduate school and here is their first enrollment date. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at these fields. So field number 35, they're asking whether this participant, oh, go ahead, Lisa.
Sorry, before we go on, there's a question that I wasn't sure. I think I know the answer is, but regarding the research, what if they participate in a research project that's sponsored by another entity on campus, but they're participating in our McNair workshops, presentations, etc. Can we note that they are taking part in research? I guess there's a place where you say whether or not.
Yeah. So here, I mean, after all, we've written this grant to say we're going to do this, right? And so I would look at those 4 measures, first of all. You know, if it's another entity, are they completing? And did you write about that within your grant? You know, to say we're not going to be conducting that, somebody else is going to be conducting that. So I definitely want to, you know, really.
I'm gonna Lourdes put.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. There's a little bit of delay. I'm going to upload the definition of what research means because it's got specific characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
Those have to be met. And then the question becomes, like Lourdes was alluding to, you know, that the intent is for you to provide that because somebody has to have control whether, in a sense, of those 4 components, are they actually being delivered so that you can claim that, okay, these 4 things happened, so that's why they count as research. So I'll put that definition in the Q&A, but the intent is for it to be your the focus coming from your project services and activities and services, you know.
Yeah, so definitely take a look at those because, again, it's really about what our intent is with the McNair Scholars Program, right? And what services we indicated we were going to be providing in preparing the participants for that doctoral degree program. Okay, so definitely take a look at that. If it is something that you wrote about, again, address those 4 things that we mentioned. Is it because we're collaborating with them, but there is maybe perhaps another entity is engaging, maybe we're collaborating together to do this. But yeah, I would be very careful with that. And you know, at the end of the day, if you're ever audited, they're going to say, well, who provided that? What documentation do you have to support that they met those criteria? You know, that it was done, you know, through a faculty, you know, and all of those things, you know, the date, start and end period. I would look at that carefully. Okay. So, but great question. Okay. So let's go ahead and continue on with this because I definitely want to make sure we leave some time for you and we still have a few more fields to go through. Okay. So in grad test, for the participant who graduated from high school, then do you want to indicate, did that student complete a graduate school admissions test? Yes or no, it's unknown. Or you'll notice that you have option 99 to indicate they weren't required to take the test because they hadn't yet earned the bachelor's degree. Okay. The first field, first grad enroll date, again, is when did that student first enroll in graduate school? Again, we only report that they first enrolled in graduate school when they were in graduate school. So again, if we had a participant that earned their bachelor's degree last year, and they are in graduate school in the 23-24 reporting period as a first year graduate program student in 23-24, then that's when we will provide the first grad enroll date. Okay. You'll notice that you have option 999 values to indicate they're not yet in graduate school. So that response, let me go back here. If I have a student now in my record structure that earned a bachelor's degree in 23-24, I'm indicate yes, they earned a bachelor's. I'm going to provide a degree date, bachelor's degree date earned in the 23 reporting period within that time frame. I'm going to include them in the 23 cohort. For field number 36, I'm going to indicate a response of 99999 values. They're not yet in graduate school. That's how I'm going to respond to that student. And then in the 24-25 APR, that's when I'm going to finally say, okay, here's their first grad enroll date. Okay, that one's the tricky one. Okay, that often will trip you up in the McNair APR. Okay. Field number 37, I'll provide the institutional code. So I'll go out to the National Center for Education Statistics website and look in the integrated post-secondary education data system database to get the code for the institution on where the student, the institutional code for where the student is now pursuing their graduate studies. Okay. You'll notice that you have the website here for the National Center Education Statistics website, the College Navigator, where you can go ahead and use the browse for the institution and get that code. Field number 38 is a critical field. This is the field where if I had a participant that earned a bachelor's degree or equivalent in 23-24, where I now have an opportunity to indicate that this student enrolled in graduate school. You'll notice that all of these options have within their description that it says for participants who have received a bachelor's or equivalent in 23-24. So options 1, options 2, options 3, options 4, they all have that inclusion of that description to say, this is a participant who earned a bachelor's degree in 23-24. The difference, option number 5 is for all others, other participants who did not earn a bachelor's degree in this reporting period, okay? So for most of us, our response is going to be 5. Okay? But for those individuals that I say, bachelor's degree, yes, bachelor's degree date within the reporting period, cohort 23, remember all those validation rules. And now here in grad enroll status, I'm going to choose option 1. If in the fall of 24, they enrolled in a post-baccalaureate program, they're in a graduate program. Option number 2 is out of those individuals who did not enroll in a post-baccalaureate program. Option number 3 is that they did not enroll in a post-baccalaureate program because they were enrolled or participating in other competitive programs, such as Fulbright, AmeriCorps, teaching abroad. So those individuals are option 3. Option number 4 is for a participant that may have earned a bachelor's degree, but you are indicating that participant was a prior year participant or who died. And so, but they had earned a bachelor's degree within the reporting period. Okay, so you'll notice that participants that where you choose an option number 1 are going to form the numerator for this particular objective. It's just validated with your responses from the other fields that we looked at, where we indicated that they were part of the cohort, or we indicated that they graduated within this reporting period. Okay, so this is how this particular objective is evaluated. Who of those participants graduated within the reporting year period with a bachelor's degree is the denominator. And option number 1 is the numerator. How many of those who graduated within the reporting period enrolled by the fall? Okay, so that's how the department, again, is using your responses to these fields of data to allow you to determine whether you have met a particular objective. Okay. You'll notice that that particular field, and let me go back to it. You'll notice that, again, this particular field is not saying, was that a currently enrolled participant? Was it a student who was served or a prior year participant? Okay. They are looking at strictly your responses to these fields to determine the denominator and the numerator. Okay. So again, it's important to understand that. Who is being evaluated? Okay. Your databases, again, will also help you, provide you with some insight into who is being evaluated. Okay. The next field of data is field number 39. This is also a critical field. And again, even though we have some options of unknowns, these are the ones that if you use unknown values, they count against you, first of all. But if you exceed 10% of using unknown, the department wants to know why. Okay. Field number 39, similar to the field with the graduate first-time enrollment, also has something in common with respect to their responses. You'll notice that options 1, 2, 3, and 4 say, for my participants who 23, 24 was their first year of in graduate program, you'll notice that option number 1. Option number 2 for participants who were first year. Option number 3 for participants who were first year graduate students. And option number 4 for participants who were first year graduate students. Option number 5 is the majority of our records if they were not a first year student within the 23-24 reporting period. Okay. So options 1, 2, 3, and 4 are only different in that now they're wanting to know if your student was a first year graduate student in 23-24, what is their status now in the fall of 24 and 25 academic year? Are they still enrolled? Option number 1, in a graduate degree program. Option number 2, they're no longer enrolled. Option number 3 is that they're no longer enrolled because they completed an accelerated program. Option number 4, they're no longer enrolled because the participant has become now deceased. Okay, so the participants, the denominator is the students who are first year graduate students. And option number 1, the numerator is those students who continue to be enrolled. And if we take the numerator again divided by the denominator, tells us the outcome. How many of those students are continuing, of those students who are first year graduate students, are continuing to be enrolled? And this particular objective, when I mentioned the objectives early on, I indicated is a high point, right? That's 4 points that you will earn for this particular objective. Lisa?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Lourdes, what slide are you, what field are you on? I keep saying.
I'm on, let me go ahead and get over here. I'm in field 39.
Okay, question, and I have 2 of them. I'm backtracking because I think you're closer to this one. So if we can't report on field 36 yet, if they graduated in 2024, can we still report on 37 and 38?
Okay, so remember, for this APR for 23-24, for the students who earned a bachelor's degree, for field number 36, in order for me to report a first grad enroll date, in the APR last year, I would have had indicated that they earned a degree last year, and I would have had a degree date in last year's APR. Now, in this year, 23-24, they are now a first year graduate student. And so now, for those students, now I can report a first grad enroll date. Maybe saying it that way might help, okay?
So they can't They can't mess with 37 and 38.
No, no,
Okay.
unless 30, the only time that you can report 36, 37, and 38 is if they are in graduate school. Okay.
Okay.
Now,
All right.
having said that, though, we're going to, at the very end, I'm going to come up with one more scenario. Okay.
Okay. So that's
So
one.
I don't want to complicate it right now.
Okay, right. Okay. Another
Well,
question, which I may be taking, let me know if this is something you have to handle separately as well. The other
Mhm.
question is, if they are enrolled in a 3+2 program where they're working on their undergraduate degree and in their junior year apply to a graduate program at our institution, so they will complete the bachelor's and master's at the same time, how would we report their status?
Okay, so for those students, if they're continuing to be served, right? Remember, we're thinking about some of these particular fields of data. And for those students, we're going to just continue indicating that they've, earned that degree when it's conferred. Okay, so if your institution is saying, you know what, we're not going to confirm or confer their bachelor's degree until they have done X, Y, or Z. So this 3+2 program. When they complete that, then your institution will say, okay, now we're going to confer your bachelor's degree. Okay? And so then that's when I can say, okay, they've earned a bachelor's degree. If that happened in 23, 24, then I can say, yes, the institution gave them their degree date and conferred it in 23, 24, and I'll indicate yes, and I'll indicate their bachelor's degree date. Now, if the student was in this program, but by the end of your program date or by essentially, we tried to think about it in terms of academic terms. So probably the end of summer of 24. If the institution had not yet conferred it, then you're going to indicate no degree, no bachelor's degree date, and no degree date. Okay, because it has not yet been conferred. Okay.
Okay.
We're going to keep them as an active participant and keep serving them because technically they're still in a baccalaureate program, even though they're working on both. Okay. So they might be, so it all depends on your institution. But once your institution says, okay, now we can confer the bachelor's degree and the bachelor's degree date, and then we can begin responding to, yes, they've earned a bachelor's degree. They've earned, here's the date they earned it. I'm putting them in the cohort 23, 24. And I'm going to indicate their field of study to all support, again, that they have earned a bachelor's. Okay. For those students, then I'm also going to report their GPA. Again, if they participated within the reporting period, did they participate in these scholarly activities or not? Okay.
There's one more on that same tone. I think it's there's one more. How do you report on a participant who earned a bachelor's degree in December and then starts grad school in January?
And so that is the great question. That's the great question. So
the report will not let us. You can't report both in the same year.
You can, and so that's where I wanted to leave at the very end. That other scenario.
Drum roll, please, okay, y'all. That I'll leave that unanswered just in case, and we will answer that at the very end.
We will answer it at the very end because yes, in response to that question, immediate. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. I'll be quiet now.
Okay. So great question. We will get to that though. Okay. Let's get through the remaining fields for those students that that did one or the other. This one did both. So Whitney, great question. But we'll get to that one because they did both things. Okay. And so we will get to that question. So let's go back to, I think we left off at field 39. Okay. And so in field 39, again, if the student was a student who was first year graduate program in 23, 24, now we can respond to these fields of data that tell us, did that student continue their enrollment in field number 39, or were they no longer enrolled, or did they become deceased? Okay. In the next field of data, field number 40, for those students where 23, 24 was their first year graduate study, what was their educational level? Okay. Were they a first year, second year, third year? Okay. Use your records from your institution to indicate what grade level they are. Okay. You'll notice that option number 1 is first year of graduate professional studies. And so I can tell you that there is another validation rule in this field number 40. I think it likes option number 1, hint, hint. Okay. If you don't use one, then sometimes the tool might say, well, wait a minute, you told me it's their first year, that their first year program in field number 39, but now you want to use second year in option number 40, and that's what trips you up. Okay, that's the validation rule. Okay, so be careful with those validation rules that are internal to the system. Okay, you'll notice again that you have other options. Those 99 values are typically reserved for prior year participants or students who have not yet earned a bachelor's degree or not yet enrolled in graduate studies. Okay, so please look at those 99 values. Okay. You'll also, let's see, field number 41. If the student, because remember now, for those students who earned a bachelor's degree last year, are now enrolled in 23-24, I provided the date when they enrolled, and now I want to tell them about what field of study. I'm going to again use the instructions to find the field of study and use those digit codes, okay, to update this. What happened last year is before, I think we used to have there was 3 digits, and then they went to 2 digits. So, so make sure you're using the most recent updated list on these studies list that are with the instructions. In field number 42, if this is a first year graduate students, they want to know, was a student participating in an assistantship? Was it a teaching, a research, or other, or they didn't participate in any assistantship with option number 4? You'll notice field number 99 says, nope, this is option number 99 because this is not a first year graduate student. Okay. I do want to mention that some of these fields, you may wonder, I'm not reporting them because they don't relate to a particular objective, but they may relate to one of the GEPRA, Government Performance Results Act fields that the Department of Education is capturing to provide more insight and providing a report to lots of different stakeholders. And so that's why we might have some of these fields, not related to the APR and or objectives, but related to GEPRA, the Government Performance Results Act, which is a report that Congress puts out that says this is how well all McNair programs are doing. And that's why we reported in those first fields that this is one of our participants. You imagine all of this information goes into like a mainframe database. They want to be able to pull out any one record and say, well, this is from this institution. And then overall be able to report on all McNair Scholars programs. Okay, so that's why it's important to put a record identifier for the institution and the batch year. Okay, so field number 43, and we're getting almost to the tail end and also our time frame. So field number 43, if the student left graduate school for any one reason, you'll see we have a lot of different reasons that we can report on that the student has left their graduate school. We can also identify that some responses that said they've left because they completed the program. If I say they completed it, though, I want to make sure to later on respond to when they completed it. Okay. You'll also notice that there's different reasons based on option number 12, the student's deceased. The student is still enrolled in graduate school. Option 99, it's not applicable because the student completed the doctoral degree. And 0 for unknown. Okay. You'll also notice that in field number 44, if I indicate that the student has completed a doctoral degree, or I'm reporting on the highest graduate degree received, but you'll notice that options 2, 3, and 4 are the ones that really identify a research doctoral program study. So a doctor of philosophy, a doctor of education, other research intensive doctorate degrees. And so the denominator becomes our students that earn bachelor's degree that are within a particular cohort, that validation. So they're looking at the graduate cohort and now looking at how many of those students that were in our denominator, because they form part of a cohort, how many now, 10 years later, have I indicated a response of 2, 3, or 4. And that becomes my numerator, number of records that earned a 2, 3, or 4. The numerator divided by the denominator gives me the outcome for if I met this objective. Again, I mentioned early on that some of those responses for that part CD, option number 4, remember that allowed us to identify whether a participant was deceased. If in the case where I indicate the student earned a doctorate or a response 2, 3, or 4, then they will stay in the denominator, even though I might have indicated they are deceased. However, if I indicate they are deceased and they have not obtained a 2, 3, or a 4 in my response, they are removed from the denominator so that they do not impact the outcome of how this objective is evaluated. Okay, and so that's an important distinction to know. If they earned it before they became deceased, and I indicate that through this response, I get credit for it. If they didn't, I'm not impacted by it, and they're removed. Okay, so that's important to note about that. Let's look at the next couple, and then we'll go back to some of those questions, and then look at that additional scenario. Okay, field number 45 is the highest grad date received. I'm going to indicate when was the highest degree earned. When I report, did they earn a master's degree? I'm going to provide that date. I'm going to, even though I may have in a prior report indicated that a participant earned a master's degree, if I indicate master's degree and I provide this is the date that they earned the master's degree, if I find now, because that person is still in my record structure, I'm still having to report on them, and I find that this individual has now earned a doctorate degree, I want to update the information and say that student has now earned a doctorate. Okay, I want to also update the date that the doctorate was received. Okay, the reason is because I'm still, and in some cases, some of those students, their cohort has not yet been evaluated. And so on the year that a particular cohort is being measured, then that's when they're going to look at my response. Well, that's when there will be more meaning to what I have reported in this highest graduate degree earned when that cohort is being measured, okay? And this year, they're looking at the cohort 13, meaning 2013 through 2014. Those individuals have now had 10 years to earn a doctorate degree. And that cohort 13 is going to be the cohort, the denominator for this objective, okay? So again, I will respond and update as needed in those fields. And then in field 46, I'll use the navigator, college navigator again to identify the institution where the participant earned their doctorate. And then in field 47, I will now indicate whether this individual who has now earned a doctorate, what is their primary employment? Are they engaged in teaching, research, both teaching and or research, some other activity? And then you'll see the other responses that allow me to say they're not a participant who has yet earned a doctorate. Field number 48, our last field, is an optional field where if we are tracking a student because they've had a name change, is where we can indicate this is the name I'm also tracking that in. Okay? So that's in summary, and I know we're a minute over, a couple
That's
minutes.
okay. If you all can hang out just a little bit, I do have a quick question before we get to that last one. Can you count law school or medical school as a graduate school?
No, unless the only ones that you can count, you'll notice that we do have that option to indicate that law school that they've earned, JD, a Juris Doctorate here. You can, that's considered a first professional degree. Okay?
What about after, immediately after, or after getting their bachelor's degree, if they go on to law school or medical school, does that count as graduate school enrollment?
No.
No. Okay.
Only if you indicate a doctor that is research intensive.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. And now I'll leave you to answer that last question
Okay. So
about.
great question again, Whitney. So, and yes, in some cases, remember, this record structure is really providing a story about the participant. And so in some of these fields of data, in most cases, I mentioned, like I had students in 22, 23 that earned their bachelor's and they're now first year 23, 24. And so I'm providing their information. But I may have in this case, and in this example that Whitney's asking about, is we may have had a student that graduated, they earned their bachelor in the fall of 23. And so in that case, if I were to go back to my fields, then I would in the field for, I would in field number 27, I would indicate yes, they earned a bachelor's. I would indicate a bachelor's degree date that might reflect the fall of 23 degree attainment. I would include them in the 23 BA cohort to indicate that they're going to be part of that cohort that I'm going to track 10 years later. And then I would indicate field 30, I would indicate their field of study that they earned their bachelor's degree. I would provide their cumulative GPA, I would respond accordingly, if they were an active participant, 1 or 2, whether they participated in scholarly activities. I would respond whether they, completed a graduate school admissions test. And in this case now, if they enrolled in graduate programs in the spring of 24, I would report that they are enrolled in the spring of 24, okay? Because they are now going to form part of this denominator because 23, 24 was the first year of graduate study for them because they were enrolled in the spring. So I would now indicate the institution that they enrolled at in the spring. The graduate, I would indicate that, because remember, they're still meeting this criteria. They received a bachelor's degree in 23, 24. So I can, in grad enroll status, I can now get credit for their enrolling in a graduate program within the same reporting period because I have provided the details in those other ones to indicate that they graduated in the 23, 24. We don't have very many of those records, but yes, it can happen. And in Whitney's case, and in our scenario, that happened. The student graduated in the fall of 23, immediately enrolled in graduate school in the spring of 24, So they met that minimum criteria of having earned a bachelor's in 23, 24. And so now I'm indicating and putting them in my denominator for having enrolled in graduate school. So I'm getting credit not only for them being and graduating with a bachelor's and now enrolling in graduate school. I will report now for that group because now that student is now also forming part of the denominator for first year in 23, 24. Okay, because I'm saying they were in graduate school in 23, 24 as a first year student. And so now in this field for field 39, I'm saying, okay, that student was a first year in 23, 24. And now I'm going to report in field number 39, now what is their status? So I can now earn also credit for that objective that they're persisting. Okay. So that was a great question because you can see that as long as I'm providing, the information, I'm getting credit for that. Some things again that you want to be careful of in those instances are those validation rules. And the validation rules here would be the first enrollment date. Because if I indicate that they are now in graduate school and I provide this first enrollment date, this field number 36, I need to make sure that this first grad enrollment date is after the bachelor's degree attainment date. Remember the story, I got to get the story straight. They earned the bachelor's and then they enrolled within the same year. Okay.
We have one more question, Lourdes, from Stephanie. Just to clarify, participants of McNair who are pursuing a JD or MD do not qualify for the McNair program. I don't know if it's qualified.
No, it's not qualified. What we are saying, because I mean, your ultimate goal when you recruited the participant was the student expressed an interest in graduate school. Okay. Now we know career majors change and things like that. What we're saying is that individuals that you have worked with that earn their bachelor's degree will form part of a cohort. And then our grant, when it was written, we're indicating that a percentage of those individuals that were part of that cohort that graduated will earn a doctoral degree that is research-based. Okay. So they can have gone on and they can have earned, a Juris Doctorate, and they could have become a medical doctor. But unless it was research-based, it does not count towards meeting that last objective. Okay. So we won't exclude those students and say, well, just because you didn't say you wanted a doctoral research base, we're not going to recruit you from McNair.
And sometimes the other thing is it's not, nobody says 100% of their students will go to graduate school and 100% will get the doctoral degree. Yes, upon entry, if you had two candidates and one from the get-go was saying, oh, I want to do research and I want to get my doctoral from the get-go, I might award that person more points, so to speak, for selection than someone from the get-go that tells me, look, I'm going to law school or I'm going to medical school. But they're a good, they're a great participant otherwise. The intent of the program is being fulfilled. So ultimately, that's your choice on your selection. But no one is saying that they don't qualify for McNair. It's just if they end up going to law school or to medical school directly after getting their baccalaureate, that it won't count as graduate school enrollment for the proposal objectives, and ultimately it would not count for doctoral degree earned in 10 years, right, Lourdes?
So not so much the graduate degree enrollment, that they have to be in a particular major or anything, but did they enroll? Because remember, that percentage for the degree, the doctoral degree attainment is often very low. I mean, I don't think I've seen very many that are maybe higher than 10 or 15%.
Very low, yes.
Very, very low. I mean, I think even 15 is high. And what we're anticipating is, and remember, we're engaging them in these experiences,
It may change their mind.
scholarly, with an idea in mind, right? I mean, we do that through all of our TRIO programs. We're trying to expose them to things that they're not aware of. And so hopefully that might, if the student change my mind, I want to do this, then that's great, right? But not that we're telling them they have to, but we're exposing them to those opportunities so that they might consider graduate research. Because again, we have to think about the overall mission of the McNair Scholars Program.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Lord, so much for that overview. It's so, we could spend hours, and it's life is complicated, and it's sometimes not an easy fit. So it's good that we have a chance to talk this out. We will have this recording ready within about 24 hours, but I urge you to go online into the Google Drive. Also sign up to see these documents, and also make sure you're a member of NEC for free, so you'll get updates whenever we find out the APR is open. We'll let you know, as well as let you know when we have the recording ready, so you could download and share with others. It's a free webinar. I want to thank Lourdes so much for helping us out. And if you have any questions, you can email me or email Lourdes. If you don't mind, Lourdes, do you mind putting your email address if you guys want to follow up with? You can also follow up with us here at NEC, and we are going to grab Lourdes. We let her rest for the holidays, but Lourdes, I'm going to be talking to you about helping us out with some other projects. So hopefully you'll be gracing us with your presence